Welcome to Work This Way, a labor and employment podcast. I'm Tina Emerson, here with Maynard Nexon attorney Jennie Kluvarius. Good to see you, Jennie.
Good to see you too, Tina.
Our guest today is Dr. Ellen Livingston, the founding partner of Livingston Shepherd Trial Consulting. Dr. Livingston has been providing consulting services to litigators on all aspects of the trial process since 1990, including in the areas of employment law. Ellen, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here with y'all.
Thank you so much. Many of our viewers, especially those who have not ever had a case actually go to trial, may not understand what a jury consultant does. Can you speak to us a little bit about how jury consultants can assist when a lawsuit is filed and what role a jury consultant plays in that?
Sure. Really, what we do as consultants, I think, if I had to sum it up in a nutshell, I would say that we bring the perspective of the juror into the trial process and into trial preparation. Because if you think about it, when attorneys go to law school, you're trained on a bunch of things. You learn torts, you learn contracts, you learn civil procedure, you learn criminal procedure, but very little, if any, about communication or persuasion or how to motivate someone or how they make decisions. And a lot of jury consultants, I would say most of them, come from a social science background. My background is in industrial organizational psychology. So what I studied is the psychology of people in the workplace. And so, for instance, some of the things that I studied and focused on was how do groups, when you get a work group together, how do they make decisions? Who becomes a leader in those groups? How do you motivate groups to work? How do you persuade people? So as you can see, what we have in a jury is pretty much that's it, right? We have a group of folks who have been formed together for the first time. They'll only be together in their life and out of, very, very vastly different backgrounds. And they've come together to form a task, to make a decision. So how is that process going to work? And how can we, you as attorneys, we can help you to see how that process comes along and to give folks like you guys, a better chance at getting the outcome you want from that process.
So Joellen, you and I have been down in the trenches together with respect to numerous trials, different trial settings, and a lot of people are familiar with or more familiar with what a jury consultant does in a trial setting. And what I would like to ask you about is, are there instances outside of that trial setting where a jury consultant can be particularly helpful in a case, and how?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the things we will do sort of, even prepping for trial, or for instance, a lot of what we will do is sometimes we're called in because the party wants to settle. They really do. Or they're getting ready for a mediation, maybe not trial, with the hopes of going towards a settlement. So we're called in a lot of times to give them a reading on the case. Let's do things like, one of the big tools we use as jury consultants, probably the most frequent one and the one folks know the most, are mock trials. So what we're doing with a mock trial is we're sort of simulating what will happen at a trial in a day or a day and a half, 2 days, whatever the process is. So we have presentations from both sides of the case. We have multiple juries deliberate. And what we're doing is getting feedback on the particular case itself and the merits of the case, but not just the merits of the case, the process of how it gets people to decide that case. So yeah, of course that can be used in trial settings. But, a lot of times what we're called in to do is because they don't want to go that far. They're looking to see, for instance, you may have insurance carriers who are like, what's a reasonable amount here? What can I justify, to my company here to say that, if we're looking to settle this, where should that settlement sort of land? Sometimes we're called in to educate people. We've had instances where the trial lawyers want us to come in because they think maybe in-house counsel has an unreasonable expectation of this case. Maybe they don't think they understand the real risk involved. So sometimes it's for maybe eye-opening purposes to educate folks who are involved in the process about maybe some of the risk and the potential outcomes of the case. And it might not be in line with what they're thinking. I've even had it, Jennie, where we've been called in by judges to use the process. Both sides have been ordered to do mock trials, to try to settle the case beforehand. And there are some judges who want to do this, but they want, reasonable assessment of the case. And they want both sides involved so that they can't just, throw away what the other side's telling them about the case. Because one other thing we will have is sometimes our clients will use, we've put together highlight clips from mock trials for them to use during mediation settlements, and they'll show it to the mediator. This is what mock jurors said about this case. This is not us. So it can be used for a variety of purposes. And then ultimately, if it doesn't settle and we go to trial, we've gained some important information to prep for trial too.
And Ellen, how do you go about finding the mock jury or a focus group in order to do a pretrial study for a case?
Yep. So we have folks that specialize in this, recruiters that are all across the country, and there's bunches of them, but we have several that we consistently worked with, and I've worked with for decades. So we'll work with these folks, and they specialize at doing this, and they do it a variety of ways. They'll have a database of people that they can use. Some of them will reach out, just randomly call. If we need people in a Chicago area code, they get 312 numbers and try to randomly dial people. And what we do, Tina, is provide them with guidelines on what they need to do for those folks. So if we're in a venue, if we're in, let's just say Chicago, Illinois, and we're in Cook County, we will research the demographics of that venue. So we know where are those people coming from? What do they typically look like that show up for the jury roles? And we'll also research recent cases if we can. Who's actually showing up? Especially since COVID, jury pools have changed to some degree. So we want to know who's showing up in the jury pools. And then we will specify for them, some quotas that we want on the demographics. We also screen out for anyone who would be connected to the case. So they will have a list of names and parties and businesses who they would, ask these folks when they're recruiting them if they have any close involvement with. And we would, not include those people in our process. But it's extremely important to get a representative sample of the venue that you're going to be in our mocks and our focus groups. And so we work really hard with our co-partners, the recruiters, to make sure that happens.
All right. So Ellen, one thing that is consistently predictable is that juries and mock juries are consistently unpredictable. And I'm always fascinated to watch and see how that process plays out, both in a mock jury setting, but also at trial. Despite the fact that there's lots of unpredictability with a jury, I'm interested to know if, given the length of time you've done this and the level of experience you have personally, there are patterns or consistencies or constants that you have seen emerge over time that our viewers might be interested in.
Yeah. So, one of the things, obviously, we can't, replicate the whole trial in a focus group or a mock trial. We're never going to get that. So what we tell our clients is we don't want to look at the specific result so much as, this is what happened. So that's guaranteed what's going to happen at trial. No, what helps us and what we learn from is the process that people go through when they're looking at the evidence and the facts in the case. How do they converse with their fellow jurors about the evidence they hear? They'll hear a story from both sides of a case, but how do those mock jurors tell that story? Because they're not going to tell it exactly the same way as either side. They're going to come up with their own version. And so what's important for us and what we look for is those patterns that we're seeing amongst multiple juries for how are they telling the story? What's emerging to them as some vital evidence here? And maybe it's something we didn't even think was going to be that important. Maybe it's something we just mentioned as an aside that they are now keying in on. So it's more important for us to focus on the process, because that will lead us to what our themes are. That will lead us to, what our case story needs to be including, so that we make sure we're including the facts and the evidence that the folks on our side of the case are keying in on. And I think one of the most important things I can always say from any type of research we do, one of the most important things we get are the questions that mock jurors and the mock focus group participants ask us, because that is key. That is either telling us they're not getting something that we need to educate them on, or that's asking us a question that maybe we didn't think about, or it's something else that they would know about that would change their opinion. So questions are also important. So we look at it as saying, look, we obviously can't recreate the trial. That will never happen. But what we can recreate is the process of how folks will come to a decision given these facts and the evidence in a case. And we can learn from that.
And can you speak to the importance of depositions, particularly video depositions, when it comes to having a mock jury assess trial witnesses?
Absolutely. It's really the best way to get a read on a witness before they're going to trial. And, what we always encourage our clients to do is video all the witnesses, all the depositions. And then, we will show during the course of the mock, on both sides, show the witness with some favorable testimony for the plaintiff side, some favorable testimony for the defense side. We try to show both sides of it. And, we all know from just our lives, you don't need the psychological research to tell you about first impression literature, right? And how important first impressions are that you make with people. So this gives us, a way to show a snapshot of these witnesses to the potential jurors, like they're going to see them, the actual potential jurors, mock jurors who are going to be like the real jurors, and get that impression, and then be able to learn from that, but have the witness learn from that. And that's the important thing, is we need the witnesses to know how other folks in this setting are going to react to them, so that we can make improvements with them. We can get them comfortable with the process. It's a vital tool that we use.
And Joellen, I know that together you and I have frequently seen situations where mock jurors will give feedback to witnesses that is sometimes pretty difficult for them to hear, but that can be invaluable in preparing a witness in a given case for trial. And many times things that perhaps their outside lawyers are hesitant to tell them about their testimony style or about how they're coming across. So I know, at least personally, I found that to be very valuable, and witnesses in our matters that we've worked with you on have as well. So I have one final question for you today, and that is, I'm very interested in how the pandemic has affected what you are seeing with juries and mock juries, and how they approach making decisions in these cases.
Yeah, it's, for a while, we had to go to a format, right? When we were doing our mock trials, we had to do some online. We couldn't do any in person. There were juries who were, watching videos and not being interacting with each other. They were deliberating through videos. That really changes the whole dynamic of the deliberation discussion. But what has happened and what has emerged and what we still see is that even now, years later, people's attitudes about COVID is still extremely predictive about whether, if you look at, whether people are going to be pro plaintiff or pro defense. And this goes across different cases. You can look at it as product liability cases, personal injury cases, negligence cases, contracts. But what's interesting is a lot of folks, the quarantining and stuff for a lot of people, it's equivalent. What they've gotten to is a little of like a form of PTSD after that, where the quarantining and they're depressive. They have a depressive disorder. There's a term, there's a factor. It's called mortality salience, right, in psychology, which means you're just more afraid. Basically, your death becomes more forward in your life, and what happens is people lose control. They feel like a loss of control over the things that are going on to them. So what we see in jury settings is anything. Now they're put in a decision, if they're serving on a jury, they're put in a control position, right? They have some control now in this setting. And what we're seeing is that, a lot of people who, especially the ones who really, really are more afraid of COVID, they tee off on thinking it's much more a health risk than an economic risk. And they're really concerned about the effects of COVID still. They're much more emotional in how they're still reacting to things. And that emotional reaction has been correlating with us in all these different types of cases with more pro plaintiff style verdicts on behalf of these people. Now, it's not everyone, and everyone's not reacting this way. And it's with most everything. You got your folks on the extremes, and most people are in the middle. But the folks who are on the extremes, and I think some of the questions we've been asking that have been getting some of the pull on this is we'll ask whether they think Corona is a real threat or blown out of proportion. Well, those people who are like real threat and strong real threat tend to be more pro plaintiff. The folks who are saying that they're more concerned about the health threat, that they would skip serving on a jury if they actually could, those types of things. So this profile is emerging and still out there that the pandemic's had some long-term psychological effects on folks, and it's showing up in how they make decisions in juries.
Very interesting.
It is fascinating work that you do. And I wanted to ask you, Jennie, how important has it been to work with jury consultants in the litigation that you work on? Because this goes a lot deeper than I think a lot of folks realize when you talk about litigated matters and jury selection.
Yeah, so I would say that a good jury consultant is worth their weight in gold because, as Joellen mentioned, when you are studying the deliberative process and how a group of people who are carefully selected to look like the demographic that you're going to find on a jury in a given case, when you're looking at and studying how they arrive at their decision, you are always going to find and unearth flaws and weaknesses in your case that you were completely unaware of previously. And some of the things that you think were important in a given case and that were the do or die issue, this is the thing the jury's going to fixate on, that just doesn't materialize. And it's always surprising to watch and learn through that process. And it really does give you great insight into how you are going to present your case to the actual jury. And to Joellen's point earlier, we have used those results from mock juries and what they would award in a given case potentially in conjunction with settlement negotiations, and frequently have been able to use that in a way that helps our client actually succeed in getting a settlement as opposed to going through with a full trial. So I would say if you've got a piece of litigation that is material in any respect, having a jury consultant involved, not just at the trial stage, but even before, can be essential for understanding the strengths and the weaknesses in your given case.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that insight. Thank you for being here, Joellen. Really appreciate it. It's been a learning process for me, and I hope that our viewers and listeners have found that to be so as well. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on Work This Way.